You don't live here anymore. That was the first thing my ex-husband said when he opened the door, my door, though no one in that room seemed to remember that. The hallway behind him glowed warm with celebration lights, soft gold spilling over polished floors I once chose myself. Laughter drifted from the dining room like a language I no longer spoke. I stood there on the porch, holding nothing but my breath, pretending the cold didn't bother me. He didn't look angry. He looked triumphant. As if my arrival was an inconvenience he had been waiting to enjoy. Behind him, someone called out, "Is she here?" and a chorus of voices rose, giddy, excited, the kind of excitement people usually reserve for unwrapping gifts. I recognized too many of those voices. Friends I once fed. Family I once trusted. People who had toasted my wedding in this very house now toasting his second marriage as if I'd never existed. I didn't step inside. I didn't need to. The betrayal was loud enough from where I stood. His new wife appeared at his shoulder, her dress still sparkling from whatever vow renewal charade they'd staged in my living room. She saw me, froze, then smoothed her expression into something polite but pleased. A woman who believed she'd won something. My ex-husband leaned against the doorframe, casual, confident. "You should have told me you were coming back," he murmured, voice dipped in false sympathy. "We're celebrating." The word hung there, deliberate. Celebrating. In the house we built. With the people who once promised me loyalty. While I stood outside like a stranger begging for permission to breathe. I didn't give him the satisfaction of reacting. My silence, for once, felt sharper than any reply. He smiled then, slow, satisfied, rehearsed. A smile that didn't belong to the man I once married, but to a man who truly believed everything between us was finally over. He had no idea how wrong he was. Because what happened next would be the first crack in that smile. The door hadn't fully closed before I heard the applause. It rolled through the house like thunder muffled by expensive walls, the same walls I'd once painted during late nights when we still believed in a shared future. Now they echoed with celebration for a marriage that wasn't mine, for promises that were once spoken to me. I stepped off the porch slowly, each footfall soft against the familiar stone pathway. Even in the dusk, I could still trace every line, every crack. I had placed each stone myself, kneeling for hours while he held the level and told me I was surprisingly patient for someone who didn't know much about construction. I used to think he meant it as a joke. Funny how cruelty hides in praise until hindsight sharpens it. The wind brushed against my face. The house watched silently behind me, or maybe that was just my memory of it. My fingerprints were everywhere inside. Cabinet handles I chose, curtains I sewed, the archway I sanded for 3 days until the grain felt like satin under my palms. Even the garden along the side of the house still bloomed the way I trained it to. People move on. Houses don't. A few cars were parked along the curb, and I recognized more than one license plate. Friends who had hugged me through the divorce. Friends who told me they were on my side while secretly attending tonight's celebration. I didn't resent them. Disappointment is quieter than anger, and far more permanent. As I reached the gate, I heard footsteps behind me, quick, hesitant, almost apologetic. "Hey, wait," someone whispered. I didn't turn immediately. I let the silence settle first, let the person behind me feel the weight of it. It was his sister, the one who used to braid my hair before family dinners, the one who promised we'd still be sisters no matter what. Her makeup was smudged, her expression torn between guilt and relief. "I didn't think you'd come back this soon," she said softly. "He didn't want anyone telling you." Her eyes flickered toward the house, then back to me. And that was when I realized something important. This celebration wasn't just a marriage. It was a secret, and I wasn't supposed to see it. For a moment, his sister and I stood in the fading light like two strangers rehearsing familiarity. The breeze lifted a strand of her hair, revealing eyes that looked older than the last time I saw her. Guilt ages people faster than grief ever does. I shouldn't even be out here, she whispered, fingers tightening around the shawl wrapped around her shoulders. He'd lose his mind if he knew I talked to you. Her voice trembled not from fear of him, but from fear of choosing a side. I didn't offer comfort, she hadn't earned it. But I didn't pull away either. What did he tell them? I asked quietly. She swallowed. Her gaze drifted toward the glowing windows, where silhouettes danced and laughed and clinked glasses over a love story rewritten to erase me. That you left, she murmured. That you didn't want the house. That he'd rescued it after you gave up. The lie was small enough to sound believable, but sharp enough to cut through every memory we ever shared. I let the truth sit between us without correcting it. People reveal more when they think you're wounded. She shifted her weight, uneasy. He said you wouldn't come back. That you had nothing to come back for. Ah. There it was, the cruelty behind the invitation list. This wasn't just a celebration. It was a performance. And the audience needed a villain. I studied her face, searching for the sister-in-law I once trusted. I saw flickers, echoes of loyalty, remnants of affection, but they were faint, diluted by months of silence. I didn't believe him, she added quickly. Not all of it. But, you know how he is. He makes things sound final, I finished for her. She exhaled, relieved and ashamed at once. Yes. Final. A burst of laughter erupted from inside the house, a deep, familiar laugh that once pulled me out of my darkest days. Now it sounded foreign. Practiced. Used. His sister looked back at me, hesitation trembling at the edges of her expression. There's something else you should know, she whispered, voice barely carrying over the wind. She stepped closer. Something they said when they thought you'd never hear it. She hesitated before speaking, as if the words themselves were fragile, or dangerous. I wasn't supposed to hear it either, his sister murmured. It happened during the toast. Right before you knocked on the door. I lifted my eyes to the window where shadows moved in warm amber light. Glasses were still raised, their celebration uninterrupted. My absence was part of their ceremony. What did he say? I asked. Her breath fogged in the cooling air. That you were a phase he'd outgrown. The sentence was soft, but it landed with the weight of stone. He said the divorce wasn't painful, she continued. He called it necessary maintenance. Like you were something to replace. An appliance, not a person. I remained still. Stillness unsettles people more than anger ever could. He said his sister glanced toward the woman wearing my house like a crown, fits the life he wants now. And that you never understood him. That he's finally with someone who knows her place. There was the truth. Not about me, but about the man he had become. Or perhaps the man he always was. I watched her face for signs of exaggeration, but there were none. Only regret. Only shame. A distant chorus of cheers rose again from the house, followed by the sharp clink of a knife against a glass. Someone making another toast. Another revision of history. You weren't supposed to hear any of this, she whispered. He told everyone you'd moved on. That you didn't care. That you wouldn't set foot in this town again. And yet, I said quietly, here I am. Her eyes softened. I didn't think you'd come back this soon. I didn't correct her. Soon had nothing to do with it. I turned slightly, letting the house fill my peripheral vision. Its lights glowed against the night, warm and deceitful, like a photograph taken just before something shatters. Inside, the man I once loved was raising a glass over the ruins of a life we built together. But what none of them knew, not him, not his bride, not the guests who rewrote our history to fit their comfort, was that I hadn't come back empty-handed. And I hadn't come back alone. Because someone else had reached out to me long before tonight, and their message changed everything. You said. Her words lingered in the air, fragile and unsteady, but I didn't ask her to clarify. Some truths reveal themselves better in silence. I stepped past the gate, letting it close softly behind me. His sister followed, unsure whether she was comforting me or confessing to herself. We walked a few paces down the sidewalk, far enough that the house's warm light no longer touched us. Out here, the night was honest. She finally asked, "Why did you really come back?" I almost smiled. Not out of amusement, but recognition. She still expected the old version of me, the woman who explained everything, softened everything, carried the weight for everyone else. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I asked, when did he start telling people I left because I couldn't handle the pressure? Her shoulders sagged. A few months after the divorce, she said. But things were complicated before that. You know that. No. I knew something deeper. He counted on people accepting whatever story made their lives easier. And people rarely fight for the truth when the lie is more comfortable. I reached the corner of the street and paused. The garden lights from our old home flickered faintly behind me, like a heartbeat I no longer depended on. I didn't come back because of the house, I said quietly. She looked relieved, until I added. And I didn't come back because of him. Her brow furrowed. Then why? I pulled my phone from my coat pocket, the screen lighting up my face. A message thread sat open, the last unread text highlighted like a warning. I didn't show her the screen, but the glow alone seemed to unsettle her. It was this, I said. She took a half step back. Who sent it? I let that question rest unanswered. Her eyes widened slightly, as if the silence itself hinted at something far larger than she imagined. From inside the house, another roar of laughter burst through the night, careless, oblivious, triumphant. The kind of laugh people use when they believe the world is safely beneath their feet. I locked my phone. They shouldn't have celebrated tonight, I murmured. She swallowed. Why not? The wind shifted, carrying the faintest echo of their cheering. Because the message wasn't meant for them. It was a warning meant for me. His sister stared at me as though the night itself had shifted. Not because she understood, but because she sensed she was standing at the edge of something she had no map for. What kind of warning? She asked. I didn't reply immediately. I let the question hover, let her wrestle with the weight of it. Some answers lose power when given too soon. Instead, I looked back at the house, our house, glowing with the kind of joy that only exists when it's built on someone else's silence. Music drifted through the walls, muffled but unmistakably bold. They were toasting to a new beginning, blissfully unaware that endings rarely arrive on schedule. It doesn't matter who sent it, I said eventually. What matters is why. Her breath caught, as if she feared I might say her brother's name. But I didn't. Not yet. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and wrapped my hands around myself, not from cold, the night wasn't cold, but from the strange calm that comes after heartbreak stops hurting. That quiet shift when pain turns into clarity. I got the message 6 months after I left, I said softly. 6 months of silence. 6 months of letting him believe I was gone for good. What did it say? She whispered. I studied her, the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers tugged at the edge of her shawl, the conflict etched across every line of her face. She was bracing herself for a ruin she couldn't name. It said there were things I didn't know, I answered. Things that happened in this house while I was still living in it. Her eyes widened. What things? Again, I didn't answer. Some truths must be earned. Instead, I let my gaze drift toward the street lamp where a moth circled the light in slow, frantic loops. It reminded me of myself once, chasing warmth that wasn't meant to keep me alive. Inside the house, music paused. Then came the sound of glass breaking, followed by murmurs, then another wave of forced laughter. His sister flinched. "I should go back in," she said. "They're going to notice I'm gone." I nodded. "Go." She took a step toward the house, then hesitated. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" I met her eyes calmly. "Tomorrow?" I said. "No. I'll be back sooner than that, and they'll be the ones unprepared." I didn't watch his sister walk back toward the house. I listened. The shift in her footsteps, from hesitant to hurried, told me she already regretted being seen with me. Inside, the music swelled again, masking her re-entry. Their celebration pressed on, as if joy were something they could will into permanence. I started down the road, breathing in the night air, letting each step carry me farther from the noise and closer to the clarity I'd been preparing for months. People assume that leaving a marriage is the end of a story. But sometimes, it's only the intermission. 2 blocks away, under a streetlight that hummed faintly, I stopped and pulled my phone out again. The screen lit my face, revealing the message thread I hadn't shown her, the conversation that had changed everything. It wasn't a long message. Just a single sentence, sent from an account they forgot I still had access to. "You need to check the house records before he moves forward." No signature. No explanation. But I recognized the number, and the timing. 6 months after they finalized the divorce paperwork. 6 months after he insisted I walk away clean. 6 months after he swore there was nothing left to talk about. I remembered the day we built the house together, the paperwork, the mortgage, the deed. My name wasn't just on the documents. My money built those walls. My inheritance paid the foundation. My credit secured the loan he couldn't qualify for alone. He always said it was our house. Funny how quickly ours became his once I was gone. I opened the encrypted folder I'd been assembling quietly ever since the message arrived: screenshots, financial entries, timestamped transfers. Proof of his choices. Proof he never thought I'd see. A car passed slowly, its headlights sweeping over me like a spotlight. I lowered my phone, letting the night reclaim my face. He thought 6 months of silence meant I had surrendered. He mistook distance for defeat. But distance is where strategy breathes. I slipped the phone into my coat and turned back toward the house, not to return, but to look at it one last time from afar. Its windows glowed with a celebration built on lies. And tomorrow, those lies would finally meet the one thing they couldn't outrun. The truth written in my name. Morning arrived without ceremony. I slept in a small rental across town, a place with no memories, no echoes, no shadows shaped like him. The kind of place where silence wasn't a threat but a companion. By 9 a.m., I was sitting in the county records office, the fluorescent lights buzzing quietly overhead. Government buildings have a way of stripping emotion from people. But today, emotion wasn't something I needed. Precision was. The clerk didn't recognize my married name. She did, however, recognize my maiden one, the one still printed neatly on the deed. When she pulled up the digital file, her complexion shifted. Not dramatically, but enough for me to notice. "There have been adjustments," she said carefully. Adjustments. Another harmless word sharpened by intention. She turned the monitor politely so I could see. My ex-husband had filed multiple requests over the past few months: transfers, reassignments, valuation updates. Quiet moves. Subtle moves. All aimed at positioning the house fully under his ownership. Except for one problem. My signature was required for every single one of them. None of these were approved, the clerk added, almost apologetic. No, I agreed softly. I didn't sign anything. She bit her lip, hesitant. Ma'am, someone tried to. There it was, the moment everything aligned. The forged signature wasn't an insult, it was a confession. I thanked her, took the printed documents, and stepped back into the sunlight. The pages fluttered in the breeze, each one holding the proof he never imagined I would come looking for. Forgery. Deception. And a paper trail written boldly in his handwriting. A car slowed as it passed me, sleek, dark, expensive. Not his. But familiar in a way that made the hair on my neck lift. The window lowered slightly, enough for a pair of eyes to meet mine. Not hostile. Not sympathetic. Just watchful. The car didn't stop. It continued down the street, turning the corner without hurry. Someone was keeping track of where I went. But it wasn't him. He was far too confident to watch me this closely. I folded the documents and tucked them into my coat, my pulse steady. Because if someone else was watching, it meant I wasn't the only one preparing for what came next. By the time I reached the rental, the documents were warm from being held too tightly. Not out of fear, fear had burned out months ago, but from the weight of confirmation. He hadn't just tried to erase me. He had gambled on the belief that I would never look back. I set the papers on the small kitchen table, smoothing the edges as though they were something delicate rather than the quiet blueprint of his downfall. The kettle hissed in the background, a soft, persistent sound grounding me in the present. I had just poured the tea when there was a knock. Not urgent. Not hesitant. Measured. The kind of knock from someone accustomed to being obeyed. I opened the door only halfway, a habit learned after too many disappointments. Sunlight framed the figure standing there, but it was the voice that anchored me in place. You came back. Not a question. A statement. He stood there with the same calmness he'd always carried, dressed in clothes that weren't expensive but well chosen. He wasn't handsome in the traditional sense, he was controlled. And people often mistake control for confidence. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. It's been a while, I replied. His gaze drifted briefly to the documents on the table behind me. Not nosy. Observant. He never asked questions he already knew the answers to. You went to the county office, he said. I didn't deny it. He exhaled softly, the faintest trace of disappointment touching the air, though not directed at me. I warned you months ago, he murmured. I told you things weren't what they seemed in that house. You sent the message. The question came out quieter than I intended. He didn't look away. I told you I would. A truth surfaced then, not spoken, but understood. He hadn't warned me because he cared about my marriage. He warned me because he knew exactly what my ex-husband was capable of. And perhaps because he had his own reasons for wanting the truth exposed. Why come now? I asked. He stepped forward slightly, the light catching the calm severity in his expression. Because he thinks he's safe today, he said. He isn't. He lowered his voice. And before you make your next move, you need to know what he did the night before you left. By the time I reached the rental, the documents were warm from being held too tightly. The air between us felt heavier, as if the walls themselves understood that whatever had burned out would tilt the entire story on its axis. But from the weight of confirmation. I opened the door wider, to erase not as an invitation, but as gambled on the belief that I would never look back. Some conversations aren't meant to be held in doorways. On the small kitchen table. He stepped inside with the same there was something delicate rather than the quiet blueprint of his downfall. Pausing only to scan the small rental. The kettle hissed in the background, not judging, a soft, persistent sound grounding me in the present. It was a habit of his. I had just poured the tea when there was a knock. He stood across from me, hands loosely at his sides. Measured. You remember the night you kind of knock from someone accustomed to being obeyed. I nodded. I opened the door only halfway, I remembered, a habit learned after too many disappointments. Sunlight defined the figure standing there, louder than shouting. But it was the voice that anchored me in place. You left because he told you he needed space. You came back, he continued. Not a question. But that wasn't the real reason. A statement. I felt my breath steady, with the same calmness he'd always carried, in readiness, dressed in clothes that weren't expensive he needed but well chosen. I whispered. He wasn't handsome in the traditional overwhelmed. Sense. He was controlled. He almost smiled. And people often mistake control for confidence. That's what he told you. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. What he told everyone else was different. It's been a while, I replied. He reached into his coat and placed his small recorder on the table, to the documents on the table behind me, unassuming. Not nosy. The kind of device people forget exists in the age of smartphones. He never asked questions he already knew the answers to. And a faint hiss filled the room went to before the audio began, he said. Laughter. I didn't deny it. Glasses clinking. He exhaled softly, the murmur of faintest trace of disappointment touching the air. Then his voice, though not directed at ex-husband's. I warned you months ago, he murmured. Confident. I told you things weren't what they seemed in that house. She'll leave quietly if I push just enough. The question came out quieter than I intended. She hates conflict. He didn't look away. That's what makes her manageable. I told you I would. Manageable. A truth surfaced then, the words not spoken, through the room but understood. With surgical precision. He hadn't warned me because he cared about my marriage. One I didn't immediately recognize. He warned me because he knew exactly what my ex-husband was capable of. A pause. And perhaps because then he had his own reasons for wanting the truth exposed. She will. Why come now? She always does. I asked. And once she's out of the house, slightly, I'll handle the light rest. Catching the calm severity in his expression. The audio because he thinks he's safe today, he said. Silence fell like dust. He isn't. I didn't sit down. He lowered his voice. Sitting would have felt like accepting your next move. Instead, you need to know what I held on to the before you left, letting the betrayal pulse quietly through my veins without overtaking me. He watched me with the patience of someone who already knew how the truth would land. There's more, he said softly. Worse than this. I lifted my eyes to him, calm, steady. Then tell me everything, I said. Because now. I was done being manageable. He didn't play the next recording immediately. He waited. He watched the way I stood, still, composed, breathing evenly. Not broken. Not shaken. Just, awake. And for the first time, I felt the balance of power tilt quietly toward me. When someone like him believes you'll never fight back, he said, they get sloppy. He picked up the recorder again, but instead of pressing play, he slid a folded stack of documents across the table. The paper was thick, the kind used for official filings. I recognized the format before I even read the text. Legal drafts. Prepared but never submitted. I unfolded them slowly. They were asset agreements. Revised valuations. And a clause, buried deep, detailing the transfer of my inherited funds into an account solely under his name. A clause he had signed but never had the courage to present to me. He tried to file these twice, the man said. The bank rejected them because your approval is required. He thought no one would notice. A bitter irony pulsed under my ribs. He had always accused me of being too trusting. Yet it was his own arrogance that made him transparent. And this, he added, pulling out one more document, is what he did the night before you left. The paper trembled slightly, not in my hand, but against the air between us, as though the truth itself carried weight. It was an email. Time-stamped. Drafted at 1:12 a.m. Never sent. Subject, House Transfer Strategy. In it, he wrote to a financial advisor, one who apparently never replied, describing his plan in clinical, detached detail. Once she's out, the process will be easier. She avoids confrontation. She'll sign anything if she thinks it ends the discussion. My vision didn't blur. My knees didn't weaken. Instead, I felt a calmness settle through me so completely it felt like alignment. Not rage. Not pain. Clarity. He mistook my gentleness for surrender. He mistook my silence for agreement. He mistook my leaving for retreat. And now, his entire strategy sat in front of me, dated, documented, undeniable. I looked up. "Why are you helping me?" I asked. He held my gaze without flinching. "Because he's about to make a move he thinks is invisible," he said. "And you need to be standing in the right place when he does." He leaned in slightly. "Tonight," he whispered, "he's going to the house alone." He arrived exactly when he said he would, late evening, when the sky was fading into that muted blue that makes everything look softer than it feels. I didn't approach the house immediately. I watched from across the street, leaning against the hood of my car, half shadowed by a tree we planted our first spring together. He unlocked the front door with the confidence of someone who believed the world still belonged to him. The porch light flickered on. He stepped inside. For several minutes, there was only silence, the soft, muted kind that fills an empty home. He walked through each room, switching on lights, checking corners, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting. Nervous rituals disguised as routine. When I finally crossed the street, I moved quietly, not to hide but because calm has its own gravity. I stopped at the doorway. He turned sharply when he noticed me there, shock flickering across his face before indignation smothered it. "You," he started, but the word collapsed under the weight of the envelope I raised between us. I placed it on the console table. He didn't pick it up right away. His eyes darted between me and the papers as if waiting for a trap. "It's all dated," I said softly. "Your drafts. Your attempts at transferring the house. Your email. The forged signature. Everything." His face drained. "You can't prove." "I don't have to prove anything," I interrupted, my voice steady. "Your own documents do that." I stepped farther into the entryway, letting the quiet fill the space he once dominated so effortlessly. "You could have asked," I continued. "You could have negotiated. You could have been honest." I let my gaze drift around the house, the walls we sanded, the floors we laid, the life we pretended to build. "But instead, you tried to erase me." He swallowed hard. His hands trembled, not with anger, but realization. The kind that arrives without warning and leaves no room for denial. "What do you want?" he whispered. "Nothing," I replied. "You've already lost more than the house." I turned to leave, pausing just long enough for the truth to settle between us. "The documents go to the attorney at 9 a.m., I said. "You should practice a better smile before then." His breath caught, the quiet sound of a man understanding the cost of his arrogance. I stepped outside. The night air felt clean. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's simply the moment someone realizes you were never the one who was powerless. Final line. "They once called me easy to forget. Now I'm the one memory they can't outrun." You said.